Most people fail at exercise not because they lack motivation, but because they try to do too much too soon. Imagine if the secret to finally building a workout habit wasn't pushing harder, sweating more, or following the latest fitness trend, but simply learning how to start small, make it automatic, and never miss twice. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you 3 simple strategies that will make exercise effortless, sustainable, and something you actually look forward to doing every week. Building a habit of exercise doesn't start with motivation. It starts with making the very first step effortless. Most people fail to stick with workouts because getting started feels like a chore, and the harder it feels to begin, the more likely they are to quit before they even get going. The key is to develop a ritual that makes starting automatic, something so routine that it requires almost no mental energy or willpower at all. Habits are formed not by grand gestures but by the repeated act of beginning over and over again, and if you can make that first moment simple and predictable, everything else becomes far easier. Imagine, for example, if every time you woke up, your workout clothes were already laid out, your water bottle was filled, and the route to your exercise spot was mapped out in advance. By reducing the friction of starting, you remove excuses before they even arise, and you set yourself up for consistency, which is the real driver of long-term success. One of the most effective ways to build this kind of ritual is to anchor your new habit to an existing one. When you attach exercise to something you already do without thinking, like brushing your teeth or making coffee in the morning, your brain naturally cues the next step, and over time the habit becomes automatic. This is the psychology behind what researchers call implementation intentions, a strategy proven to double or even triple the likelihood that people will follow through on their goals. By filling in a simple sentence like, during the next week, I will exercise on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 a.m. at the park. You create a mental contract with yourself, a clear plan that eliminates ambiguity and procrastination. The ritual doesn't need to be elaborate, it only needs to make starting inevitable. You might begin by walking to the gym, stretching in your living room, or doing 5 push-ups before breakfast. It doesn't matter how small or seemingly insignificant the action is. What matters is that it becomes a repeated signal that your exercise habit has begun. Each time you follow through, even on the smallest task, your brain reinforces the identity of someone who exercises consistently, and over time, these small cues compound into a stable, long-lasting habit. By removing uncertainty, simplifying the start, and creating predictable cues, you make it far easier to show up day after day, and once showing up becomes easy, sustaining the habit becomes almost automatic. The focus shifts from forcing motivation to simply executing the ritual, and in this way, starting your workout becomes a natural part of your life rather than a struggle, laying the foundation for all the progress, strength, and consistency that comes later. Even when you've established a ritual to start exercising, there will always be obstacles that seem to get in the way, and understanding exactly what is holding you back is one of the most powerful steps you can take toward building a lasting habit. Many people tell themselves stories like, "I'm just not the type of person who exercises," or "I can never stick to a workout routine." But most of the time, these are not truths. They're assumptions that keep us from seeing the real barriers. The truth is that most people aren't failing because they lack motivation or discipline. They're failing because the way they've structured the habit is inconvenient, intimidating, or unpleasant in some way. By breaking down your exercise routine and analyzing each step, you can pinpoint the specific moments where friction occurs and then find a practical way around it. It might be the drive to the gym, the time it takes to change clothes, or the social pressure of working out in front of others. Once you identify these bottlenecks, the solution often becomes surprisingly simple. For example, if driving to a gym feels like a chore, you can exercise at home or in your neighborhood. If being around strangers is intimidating, you can choose a private workout space or do online classes. The goal is not to fix every challenge perfectly, but to address the ones that actually prevent you from showing up consistently. When you solve just 1 or 2 of these critical hurdles, your chances of maintaining the habit increase dramatically. This principle applies to everyone because habits are not an all or nothing endeavor. They are a system of small, repeatable behaviors that can be adjusted over time. You might start with a 2-minute walk or a single yoga pose, and by making it easier to start, you remove the excuses that often lead to inconsistency. This step requires honesty and self-reflection. You have to observe your own behavior without judgment and figure out which aspects of the process are creating resistance. Once you understand the underlying barriers, you can experiment with simple adjustments that make the habit approachable and sustainable. Over time, these small improvements compound, and the habit becomes not just a task you do, but a part of who you are. By focusing on the system rather than labeling yourself, you gain control over the process and build confidence that you can follow through, even on days when motivation is low. Understanding your obstacles allows you to design a habit that actually fits your life instead of one that constantly fights against it. And when you can do that, consistency becomes far more natural and achievable, setting the stage for long-term growth and success. Even when you have a clear ritual and understand the obstacles in your way, there will still be days when things don't go as planned. The truth is, habits are rarely built in a perfectly linear fashion. Life will inevitably get in the way, motivation will dip, and you will occasionally miss a workout or skip a session. What separates people who build lasting exercise habits from those who don't isn't perfection. It's having a plan for when failure happens. Preparing for setbacks doesn't just make you more resilient, it transforms mistakes into opportunities to reinforce the habit rather than abandon it. One of the simplest but most powerful strategies is to set a rule that focuses on immediate recovery rather than beating yourself up for slipping. A principle like never miss twice can dramatically change your mindset. If you miss a workout today, you commit to completing the next one without fail, and in doing so, you prevent small lapses from snowballing into long-term inconsistency. Another strategy is to create flexible boundaries rather than rigid deadlines. By focusing on repeating the behavior consistently instead of achieving a specific result on a strict timeline, you remove the pressure that often leads to avoidance. For example, instead of aiming to run 5 miles in your first week, you might decide to just put on your running shoes and step outside for 2 minutes, allowing the habit to exist without the burden of performance. This is where the focus on identity over outcomes becomes so critical. When your goal is to be the type of person who exercises, rather than to immediately achieve a certain level of performance, missing a session doesn't feel like failure. It's simply a momentary deviation from your identity, and you have the chance to realign quickly. Having a plan also includes knowing exactly how to get back on track. This could mean scheduling a shorter workout for the next day, adjusting the time of day you exercise, or having a backup activity that's easier to complete when energy is low. The key is consistency, not perfection, and by planning for failure in advance, you remove guilt and frustration, which are often what derail habits permanently. Every habit has friction points, but the people who stick with exercise long-term are those who accept that lapses will happen, respond immediately, and continue building momentum. Over time, these strategies compound, creating a resilient system that can withstand interruptions, low motivation, and life's unpredictability. Once you master the ability to recover quickly from missed workouts, your habit becomes far less fragile, your confidence grows, and the act of exercising becomes a normal, integrated part of your life rather than a constant struggle. Once you've established the habit of consistently starting your workouts and prepared a plan for when things inevitably go wrong, the next step is learning to focus on the habit itself rather than the results. One of the biggest mistakes people make when trying to build an exercise routine is obsessing over immediate outcomes, weight loss, muscle gain, endurance, or performance improvements, before the habit itself has been firmly established. The truth is, results are a byproduct of consistency, not a prerequisite for it. When you start a new exercise habit, the most important goal is to become the kind of person who shows up, no matter what, day after day. It doesn't matter if your first few workouts are short, light, or imperfect. What matters is that you create the pattern of showing up so that it becomes a normal, automatic part of your life. One strategy to reinforce this is to set an upper limit on what counts as a workout rather than a minimum expectation. For instance, you might decide that a workout can last as little as 5 minutes. By giving yourself permission to start small, you eliminate the excuses that often prevent people from showing up, and the habit begins to cement itself in your identity. Over time, as showing up becomes automatic, the intensity, duration, and complexity of your workouts can naturally increase without requiring an enormous push of motivation. Another critical point is to separate the habit from performance pressure entirely. If you tie your self-worth to the results of each session, you are more likely to quit when progress is slow or you miss a day. Instead, focus on the process, taking action consistently, regardless of the immediate outcome. Your identity shifts from being someone who tries to exercise to being someone who exercises regularly. This mindset removes guilt and frustration from the process and replaces it with a sense of competence and momentum. Real transformations don't happen overnight, they happen when small, consistent actions compound over weeks, months, and years. The key is patience and persistence. By focusing on building the habit first, you create a stable foundation on which results will naturally follow. This approach applies to any form of exercise, whether it's strength training, running, yoga, or even daily walks. Without a habit, every goal is fragile, vulnerable to life's distractions and waning motivation. With a habit, results are inevitable because the system is in place. Over time, as the habit strengthens, what once felt like a struggle becomes effortless, and the act of exercising itself becomes rewarding. Once the habit is ingrained, you can explore more advanced routines, challenge yourself, and achieve outcomes that once seemed impossible, all while knowing that the core of your success lies in the habit you built, not the results you chased. Once you've mastered showing up consistently and focusing on the habit itself rather than immediate results, the next step is to build your environment in a way that makes exercise easy and almost automatic. Motivation is fragile, and relying on it alone to get you to work out will only get you so far. The people who stick to an exercise habit long-term design their surroundings to reduce friction and remove excuses. This can be as simple as laying out your workout clothes the night before, keeping a water bottle filled and ready, or having your yoga mat unrolled in the living room. When the cues to exercise are visible and the barriers are minimal, your brain is more likely to follow through without needing a huge surge of willpower. You're not relying on motivation, you're leveraging the power of your environment. Another strategy is to use habit stacking, linking exercise to something you already do consistently. For example, you might commit to doing 10 push-ups immediately after brushing your teeth in the morning or taking a short walk right after finishing lunch. By anchoring a new habit to an existing routine, you create a mental shortcut that makes the behavior more automatic. Small, repeated behaviors compound over time, and these tiny cues eventually become invisible triggers for your workout. It's also important to celebrate progress in a meaningful way, not just focus on the long-term results. Each time you show up, acknowledge it. Even a simple mental pat on the back or marking an X on a calendar reinforces the behavior and helps it stick. Over time, your identity begins to shift. You start to see yourself as someone who exercises regularly, rather than someone who tries to work out. And when your environment, cues, and self-identity align, you remove much of the friction that usually leads to skipping workouts or quitting altogether. The key is to design your life so that the decision to exercise isn't a heavy, deliberate choice but a natural extension of your day. Once you experience the power of aligning environment, cues, and identity, it becomes clear that building a habit isn't about willpower, it's about smart design. And when you see how small adjustments can dramatically improve consistency, you start to wonder what else in life could benefit from the same approach. How would your life change if you applied this strategy to other habits beyond exercise? Could you intentionally design your environment to make success almost unavoidable in multiple areas of your life? If you're curious about maximizing this effect and learning 4 reasonable ways to achieve accelerated results, make sure you check out the next video. Don't forget to like this video if it helped you rethink your approach to exercise habits, and subscribe so you never miss practical strategies to build better routines and achieve your goals.